Hello, this is Maddox and Dwight. You're listening to For the Love of Creatives podcast. And today we're here to welcome our featured guest, Curtis Tran. Welcome, Curtis.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Glad you could
Yeah,
join
we've been
us.
real. Oh, sorry. We've been really looking forward to this. Just so the audience knows, I guess we met Curtis at Creative Mornings, but
Multiple times.
yes,
Yes.
but we really met Curtis at the Art Boost here a couple of weeks back. Had an opportunity more to connect and talk with him, and yeah, that was where the idea to have you come and be a featured guest came from, and so here we are. So I think I'm gonna lead off with something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's a little different than what we normally do, but I know that just from talking to you and reading your bio that you're very, very community oriented, and I would love to maybe hear the origin story of that. We're going to talk a lot about your creative journey, your creative life, but when it came to creativity and community, tell us a little bit about how I mean, I can tell you have a passion for it in your writing. Tell us how, when, where that was born.
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, through my creative journey, I'm typically known as a photographer, right? Specifically at Creative Mornings, that's how y'all met me. And I love that you mentioned that we specifically talked more at Art Boost because I didn't have a camera in my hands. And so, whenever I don't have a camera, you could probably have more conversation out of me because I feel as if whenever I have the camera, I'm just constantly looking like, oh my gosh, this angle or shot could be nice. But so the origin of community, a little bit of backstory for me is that a lot of my upbringing growing up, I was always shown the opposite of that. I would definitely say so. So I was always the way how I would describe my community was that I essentially was the outcast of the outcast. And the reason why I would say that is because my family came from Vietnam over 3 decades ago. They were the last remnants of the Vietnam War. And my father, whenever he came here, was actually supposed to be he was supposed to be executed, and because he was one of um, the last bits of the Viet Cong army that was able to speak about democracy, and because of the Reagan amnesty, he was able to immigrate here to the States. And he took me, basically had me and my brothers and my family at Nacogdoches, Texas, is where I'm from. So, fun fact, I'm not even a Dallas local. Well, I do live here now, but I spend most of my time in East Texas. And to paint a little bit of a better picture, I specifically graduated with a class of around 400 people, 450, 420, and I was probably like one out of three Asians. And so I there was every walk of life except for the one that was similar to mine. And because of that, I didn't necessarily whenever I had a community back there, it wasn't one that looked like me. It wasn't one that talked like me or sounded like me. It was always an amalgamation of different people. And in turn, I've learned and have been shown what it's like to not fit in. And if anything, I think it's now it's weirder for me to fit in. If anything, it's weirder to sometimes not have those walls or anything like that. But I now make it a journey to where every time I speak to someone, I automatically look at well, how do they carry themselves? What is in their heart? Like what do they bring to the room? And then I will then decide, are you my community? Are you my person? And so a bit of a long-winded answer, but
Oh, I love that though, Curtis, because what you're describing, what I'm translating out of what you're saying is you've gone from feeling like you really didn't belong anywhere to now it's a choice. You are very discriminating and discerning, and you choose where you want to belong and where you don't want to belong. And I've walked that path myself. So this, I think, we've been talking about this a lot in the last few days, Dwight and I, and I think that we always hear psychologists say that I'm not good enough is pretty much a universal wound. Almost all of us have that. And I think I don't belong is a second, I mean, it's a runner up. I
Mm,
mean, there's been so many of us, if we're the least little different in any way, it doesn't matter whether we're a different race or we're a different size or we're a different sexual orientation. Um, I've certainly experienced a lot of not belonging. And I think the big thing for me was realizing that I had put that in place myself. It was an unconscious choice that I had made.
Well, and to be fair, it's something that's modeled. I mean, one of the first games that we all get to play is musical chairs, and that's just formalizing edging someone out.
Yeah. Do
no,
they still
I
play
think
that in
that's a great way
schools?
to think about it.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if they still play that in schools or not, but I certainly remember it when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
Certainly remember it. Yeah, and if you were, yeah, I was never the fast one, so I was the quickest one to lose my chair. I can speak to that. Well, tell us a little bit more, that not belonging, and now you look at people and you assess it instead of a group thing. I get that you're assessing it on a one-on-one person, but how does that affect your desire for communication, community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've always have seen the discrepancies within different individuals, like maybe like as like how fundamentally strong is this foundation of this relationship? Platonically, romantically, it's just, what do we use to base it on? And sometimes it could be a hobby, sometimes it could be shared interest. And, you know, I I think what I want to tie back to is that whenever I kept thinking about over the weekend who truly is my community, and honestly kept going back to creatives. Creatives are specifically my community because whenever I go through these different demographics, could be sexual orientation, could be race, could be religion, demographics, different job sectors or industries, there's always the different nuances, where you have to balance on this tightrope on how you navigate that conversation. But I think with creatives, fundamentally, there's this fundamental love that exists. And I think it really just goes back to expression. And ultimately, I think being a creative, there's a sense of you want to express, you want to communicate, and there has to be someone on the receiving end to receive that communication. And whenever it comes to how I carry those one-on-one conversations, like I honestly, like sometimes it could be deeper things, but sometimes it could just be simple things like, are you asking me questions or am I just asking, do I know your entire life story and you don't even know what's my last name?
Mm.
Stuff like that.
That's a real thing too. I've certainly had my share of one-sided friendships
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
and primary relationships. It's a real thing. You spoke a minute ago about the demographic, and I'm going to inject just a little bit because we're all about that. We pay attention to demographics, but in a very different way than most organizations or communities do. We pay attention to demographics in that we want a wide variety of demographics in
Hmm.
what we're building. And so it's not we're looking for, white 40 to 60-year-old people or anything like that. It's we're looking for this broad swath of all ages and all demographics. But we do focus on psychographics. And the number one
Right.
thing we look for in psychographics is, and we call it out in all of our marketing and our conversation, we seek heart-centered creatives.
Mm.
We've both discovered, now I've been creative my whole life. I was a hairdresser and makeup artist for 40 years. And I've done all kinds of creative stuff. I've played the piano and I've sang and oh my gosh, I just can't even name all the things I've done. But I never ever have been part of a body of people that all said, I'm a creative, until the last couple of years. And we kind of stumbled into this. I don't really believe in coincidences. I think that it's all, kind of on purpose. But to us, it felt like one day we just looked around and we were surrounded by creatives and we were kind of digging it. And we have found that yes, they are our people, but we've also discovered that when you look at creatives, most of the time it is very diverse demographically, and and they all play well together. And I think you were at our Speed Connections thing we did
Hmm.
at, I call that out where I said, the thing that brings us together is our love of creativity.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And it's just, it's remarkable. I'm not saying that I don't occasionally meet a creative that I is not my people. I do, but it's the exception, not the rule.
One of the things that you hit upon when you were just talking about your experience and how you were drawn to creatives was how there is an innate openness, and it's something that you felt, but I've discovered that that's something that's confirmed in science. A common trait that creatives share is openness to new experiences.
Mm, I love that. I mean, there has to be new ways to express to I always so y'all know that I have this day job in consulting and so on. And we have all these different professions or hobbies that pay the bills or X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, being a creative, I always describe it as like this is what keeps me sane. This is what keeps me in love, is just the experience of humanity in itself. And creatives are people that I I will definitely say I'm a big fan of the show. So I love how you guys have navigated different conversations, and that I I really do want to say that being a creative is someone that just like it can really just be anyone. Like as soon as you just have a creative thought, you are a creative right then and there because you're open, you want to create, you are experiencing what makes life so beautiful, and it can be expression through creation. It's awesome.
I think that part of what makes us so wonderful is that in order to be really connected to that creative part of ourselves, we have to be really connected to whatever higher source it is that we believe in. And I think that for me, that I know that higher being is a being of love, and it just all fits to me, you know, because we're so connected. The creativity is the pretty much the conduit between that higher self or higher power and self. And along with that conduit of creativity comes a lot of cool stuff, like love and compassion and empathy. And, um, you know, I, I can't imagine now that there's very many people that haven't heard me say it's our belief that creatives are the people that have the power. Whether we'll use it or not is another story. But the creative community are the body of people on this planet that have the power to heal humanity.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm really curious about some of the earliest experiences that you've had, uh, being that you had to deal with being different, not seeing yourself whenever you would, just go and try to take part in things that were local. How did that play out for you in just finding your way and navigating life? What was that like?
So I love that you asked that because I stayed in East Texas all the way through college, and thankfully it's been years, so I've had so many new experiences to where it is slowly just becoming not my entire experience, but fractional and proportionate. So obviously I was in communities to where I mean sometimes it wasn't just being Asian, sometimes I was the only person of color in the room. And that would happen like 99% of the time. So I was very used to that. And it was interesting because although these people accepted me in the room per se, but they had all these different stereotypes or stigmas with me. And I think something that I hate and I absolutely like will spend probably the rest of my life trying to change this. But growing up in there, like in 90% of the conversations I would have, it would somehow relate back to my skin. And back in East Texas, they're very, very curious. And sometimes it's a place of hate, sometimes it's a place of curiosity, and but sometimes it's naive and the way how to go about it. But a great example is that it's like, oh, Dwight, it's very good to meet you. So what are you? And it would literally be either the second or third sentence that they would speak to me. And so in that, it's interesting because I essentially became very desensitized to it, to the of my initial reaction to it, but then I became a lot more attuned of basically digging deeper of where does that place come from, of where they ask those questions. Because I will say sometimes, I will definitely say in East Texas, it wasn't all hate per se, but it really just, they were very naive. There wasn't many
Sure.
people that looked like me. So they were just genuinely curious. They just didn't know how to ask questions like, hey, like they'll ask me questions like, what kind of Asian are you? What kind of Chinese are you? What are you? And they would speak to me like an animal sometimes, but maybe they just didn't really know any other different way. And so I kind of made it my mission in East Texas to really be heavy on education. So specifically in my alma mater, Stephen F. Austin, I created an organization called Organization of Asian Excellence. And it was specifically focused on educating the communities through my experience. And it was actually made in response to COVID-19.
Mm.
So it where I was seeing people like me get discriminated, mass crimes, and mass murders. It I was anxious the entire time. And so I my change was that I created a whole organization and led a bunch of Asians, like the few Asians that existed at SFA, my alma mater, and we made some change. And it's funny because it everyone pretty much enjoyed me, and I was part of the Office of Admissions program at SFA, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you may have experienced this before, where oh my gosh, you were the token person of color. So we're gonna put you on all of our promotional material. So it's funny because you can go all around Texas, and if you see any sort of SFA material and there's an Asian guy on there, 99% of the time it's most likely me. And it's so interesting because I did all this change in response to how I grew up. And I would say like the SFA probably had like 0.01% of Asians. But as soon as I graduate, I guess it worked because that 0.01 probably wanted to what, like 0.05 or 1%. But it
Yeah.
did some change. It was something.
Oh,
So
yeah. You were the representation that you needed.
yeah,
You
exactly.
you were there for somebody else.
Well, and
Absolutely.
you never know as time moves on how that ripple effect will change things, you know? You never we don't know that ripple effect. We know it exists, but we don't usually follow it to
Right.
see exactly how things changed. You spoke a few minutes ago, Curtis, to the curiosity. And I myself have all of my life been fascinated by people that are different than me. I'm very curious myself, and I love different cultures, and I love different traditions and things, and it's just such a fascination. And I've learned, to not ask those questions, even though my desire for the answers is from a clear,
Hmm.
loving place. I just life is really boring if everybody is around you is just like you. That's what I don't understand about the set of white people that really want everything to just be white. Oh my
Hmm.
God. I don't get it. It sounds horribly boring to me.
Oh my
All of
gosh.
my life I've had friends from different backgrounds, and it's what makes life interesting. Um, but I don't know, there's something about it that I wish I could just snap my fingers and have it be different.
Absolutely. I
I
will
wish I
say
could have it.
I meet individuals like you, Maddox, to where, you grew up around diversity, and it's not necessarily a question like when your questions purely come from a place of curiosity, and like for you, it's more of like I see it as like you're just curious about my story, about how I live, versus sometimes it can be like, let's dissect some of these stereotypes or stigmas I may have about you, and let's see how true they are. Like, let's put them to the test, stress test. But,
Oh no.
I wish I met more people like you, Max, growing up. But I try to make my entire community now in Dallas to hang out with people like y'all.
Well, and the diversity all these years has been by my choice because my family was not that way.
Hmm.
I just struck off at an early age. I was married to a female in my early 20s, and I lived in a small town in Central Texas. We're talking 1977. I married an Hispanic woman, which was
Hmm.
something that just wasn't really done back then. And my family never even questioned it. I brought her home and introduced her, and they fell in love with her. And of course, my family, when I brought my first man home, he was Hungarian well, yeah, no, his parents were from Hungary, but he was not. He had grown up in South America. But my family just welcomed him right in and loved him too. So, but they were open, but if you looked at all my family, they're all hanging out with white people for the most part.
Hmm.
I'm the oddball in my family that has just embraced all of the differences because I find it so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Dwight, what was it like for you growing up? Because was it more of interracial relationships? Was it always like, what was that like for you?
Well, ironically, I grew up in what would become a majority minority city, and I grew up in Grand Prairie, and it was still very much like what's depicted in the teen movies, American Pie or Mean Girls. That that was kind of the existence. That was real. That was
Oh.
my experience. So I felt like there was a lot that was on display and represented, and even the more uncomfortable parts. The black face in the crowd, the token black friend, and so I felt that at a lot of times, and it could be uncomfortable at times. And there were instances where I experienced subtle racism, and occasionally when I would go back to East Texas to visit my grandparents, not so subtle racism. So
Mhm.
it was it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Dwight, I remember you and I connected of our backgrounds in East Texas. So, like whenever it's like sometimes people would literally open up conversations like, "Oh my gosh, Dwight, this is my Asian friend Curtis." Like they make it's like, is that all I am to you?
Oh, the sad thing about it is they probably don't realize and don't intend to be that way.
Hmm.
I think there is intentional racism, and then I think there's racism that's just ignorance. And although it's still racism, let's, call a spade a spade. But I myself, have said some horribly racist things in my life because I didn't know they were racist. I literally didn't know. And when somebody enlightened me, I was just mortified that that
Hmm.
had come out of
And
my mouth.
I've experienced it on many different levels, and it's one of those things where if you're looking for something bad, you're going to find it in anything.
Right.
And there have been those instances where someone would say to me, especially as a child growing up, "Oh my, you are surprisingly articulate." And
Mm.
um, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, I think.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I've made some horrible faux pas in my life, but I've lived to tell about it. Nobody's killed me yet.
Well, life shouldn't necessarily like whenever you go back to in terms of expression, sometimes our expression really is coming from a place with the limited experience and knowledge that we may have. And I will never I've met like I'm used to super the conservative rednecks, hicks and so on. Like it's funny because I find a lot more like I'm just so used to them versus like the city folk here in Dallas at times. But the thing is that it is when it not all mistakes or hiccups have to define you, but the way how you carry yourself after moving forward, it is okay to acknowledge that I was wrong and I wasn't educated before. And I think that's something that fundamentally goes back to creatives that sometimes it goes, they will speak and discuss about things and express and portray sometimes events, different mentalities, philosophies, and so on. And it's just like kind of like going back to like just the openness. And that's something that I think fundamentally, whether or not, like, if someone can see the most PC thing to me is not what I care about most, typically me as an individual, just because I can't really control or no one can really influence what information that they were given previously, but they'll take this new information experience and how to move forward with it. I think that's what makes it more important.
Well, and how we define PC changes like on a really
Hmm.
rapid rate. So it's like what you think's PC, you find like last week is this week it isn't so PC. That really messes me up. But so let's shift gears a little bit. I want to hear more about the actual creativity part of your journey. I'd love to know how old you were and what it was that tipped you off where you went, "Oh, I'm I'm creative." That moment when the light bulb went off.
I don't. I probably can't think of a time because I think if you find me on Facebook and you like just scroll far enough, you can probably just find like I used to draw growing up. I remember I my well my father was a soldier, so I used to be obsessed with the army. I think most kids and most boys specifically in East Texas were just like, oh yeah, I want to become a soldier and shoot all these cool jets or whatever. But I used to draw it, and in s- so specifically through then, I've for me, so for now, people know me as a photographer, and absolutely, I love it. I'm fine with that. But my creative journey, it's always constantly changing, and I never know if maybe tomorrow maybe I'll become a writer or I'll become like maybe a cinematographer. We're not sure. Like I used to draw growing up. I used to do poetry in the seventh grade, and then I specifically did band. So I was obsessed with music production for a tiny bit, and then now I'm really big into photography. But in all honesty, I'm getting close to like I want to look into cinematography and creating videos, and so you just never know. So when it I I think I've just been creative my entire life. I just am not sure what am I gonna hyperfixate just yet.
It's almost easier to give yourself the label creative than it is to give yourself the label photographer because
Yeah,
the creativity covers it all, and then you can do all those. I love the multifaceted aspect of it. I think that's amazing. So you don't ever have time to get bored with anything.
absolutely. I'm actually currently in the process of doing some rebranding. I'm working with this amazing graphic designer, and that's helping me with branding. And so they're not, I think graphic designers such a limited, it's that my basically I have my brand team essentially. And they kept asking like, okay, well, if you do photography, then like maybe we need to hone down and like speak about your niche and say that you do photography. It's like, well, I think that's cool and I agree on that. Like, I talk about that in my day job, like, hey, what is your niche? What markets are you in? But in my head, as a creative, I was like, but I don't know if I'm gonna do photography like forever, Like,
It's interesting that you say that because one of the things that I learned sometime in the last couple of years, which was really powerful. It was a marketing person that said, picking a niche doesn't mean that's the only people you can serve.
Mm,
Picking a niche is for the purpose of knowing who you market to. You can
yes.
serve anyone that you want and any capacity you want, but your marketing vehicle needs to be, niched. Otherwise, it's too broad and everybody wants to work with a specialist.
Yes.
If you have heart problems, you don't go to a dermatologist or a GP doctor, you go to a cardiologist. And that's true for almost everything nowadays. We
Absolutely.
want that specialist. So, yeah, just because you market to it doesn't mean it's who you serve particularly. You serve anybody.
So what was that like for y'all? Have you guys So for you, Maddox, I know that you're a hairdresser, singer, and now you're doing community creation. Like, tell me a little bit more about y'all's like creative journey. What was that like for you guys?
Well, I guess I got deemed as the creative one in the family when I was a kid because I was always decorating the house. It was like mom would say, "Oh my God, you take the same tired Christmas decorations every year and you make the house look different." And she didn't know
Oh,
how I did
I love
that.
that.
But yeah, I just was always making something, or it wasn't necessarily art. I mean, I took art classes in middle school, but I've been probably more involved in art in the last few years than I have been the whole rest of my life. But I've always gravitated. I've done photography and um, a variety of different things. Right now, I'm like oddly drawing a blank. I love to entertain, and that certainly has an artful quality to it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and it's shifted, the way I used to entertain and the way I entertain now. It's much more streamlined, and it has more of a purpose rather than just bringing people together. It's bringing people together with a specific outcome. That makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely will say so whenever you did the workshop with us at Art Boost, I love that you were able to say that like typically creatives can be more introverted at times, but it we all came out of it with the want and the better ability to connect. And so I could definitely see it like from even the places that I've seen you at. It's like it's you are cultivating an environment, but it's very intentional and I love it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you. That means a lot, Curtis. We love what we do, and even though sometimes we get really frustrated and it can be really challenging, our heart is, both of us, is very much in the bringing people together, and not just any people now. We really are in love with the creatives community. Like, we live for it. We eat, we breathe, we sleep. You name it. It's all about creativity.
I love it. All right,
yeah.
Dory, I wanna hear your journey. I wanna hear it.
Sure. Yeah. I had the fun experience of growing up more or less as an only child for all intents and purposes. I have two much younger siblings, but they're kind of the second set. And in addition to being the only child in the house, my parents worked a lot and they split up. So I had to find ways to entertain myself. And that meant that I had a lot of time alone and I had to fill my days. And so I had to get really creative about building a pretty rich inner world. And I would just go there at will. I spent a lot of time outside and I did a lot of creative, artsy things growing up. I drew as a small child, and it's kind of one of those things that more or less went away. Like uh, about a year or two ago, Maddox and I went to a drawing class, and I could see how quickly it came to me because it was just like something that I'd let go, and it was kind of a familiar friend. And like you, I was involved in band. I played music, and it was kind of a nice way to build community there because I remember uh, building a lot of relationships with the other players and really getting a feel for how that came together. And other than that, it's just been my creativity has come in the way that I had to survive. One of the unfortunate things about my journey was that there was some unnatural friction that I went through with my family, and uh, from the age of 17 up to my enlistment in the Army at the age of 23, I was more or less figuring out how to make it on my own. And that at times required some extreme creativity because, as you know, at the age of 17, you can't sign contracts for things like a lease for an apartment. And it required having to get creative to try to make sure that the basics were taken care of. And having had those scars, it's made it to where I'm pretty resilient when it comes to a lot of challenges. My breaking point is a lot. I'd say I'm able to put up with a lot more than most people would um, try to run away and hide and give up on. Like I know that there's something to be said about having that perseverance, that willingness to see something through to the end. That makes it so that whenever you're on the other side of it, you enjoy it that much more.
I love that. I typically don't hear many creatives. Typically, the sentiments that I hear is, I'll start something, but then something else will come in. I'll hyperfixate it. So it's like I have 100 projects going on at the same time. So it's kudos to you that you're one of the few creatives where like if I start something, I'm gonna see it through. I love it.
I
Yeah,
can be a
he's
little
hell
obsessive.
bent when he gets focused, and it's not like anything I've ever seen. Like, I don't know how he does it. It's
Oh, I
crazy.
love it. I'm gonna sit down with you and get a coffee and like help me to study or just lock in and these projects. I love it.
Yeah,
I'm
some of it really boils down to what's necessary for survival because one of the things that I discovered was that I can be a little bit overwhelmed in a scene where there's too much happening, and people naturally filter out a lot of things, and for whatever reason, I've got this vigilance that makes it to where I have to really focus. Otherwise, I'm just overwhelmed and I could lose consciousness. So that kind of helps.
Wow.
yeah, he's got a little bit of an incentive to stay focused because he literally passes out, loses consciousness if he gets
Oh wow.
overstimulated. Yeah. So we have a few minutes left, and I have one more thing I'd like to. We've already talked about some cultural stuff, but we've had such a wide variety of guests from varying different cultures, and some of the most interesting conversations we've had has been about how their families responded when they started showing up as a creative as a child, whether the family was supportive or not supportive, or the messages that you got. All these stories have been so rich, and yeah, I'll stop there.
Oh, okay. So if anyone listening knows anything about me, uh so my when it comes to my family, it's very, very complicated. And that it all just it's a simple, I would say crutch that leads to just a multitude of problems. But it's just a language barrier, basically. And like although like so for my family like they can speak Vietnamese to me and I'll like understand it and I'll respond back to English. But for me they wanted me to be Americanized so much they were so afraid of of the war-torn country that they left that they made sure I didn't know Vietnamese growing up. And but obviously, in honesty, they regret it, and so now I'm taking two lessons and trying to change that. But specifically when it comes to my creative journey and how they respond to it, I don't think they really know and understand, to be honest, because like I've shown them, they've seen my pictures and they know that I do X, Y, and Z, but I don't think they truly understand that I am like full-fledged creative. I think what you might find in a lot of different communities that are similar to mine, it's kind of they really just ha they really filter out a lot of information. So really, they really only want to know if I'm just eating and if I'm making money, and that's it. So it's, and honestly, my family's very detached from the people that I talk to, what I do for fun, my favorite color, and so on. And I think for a lot of people that may seem as a maybe a very disheartening thing, but that's just how my family operates. And specifically for us, yeah, they just don't know that I'm a creative. They know I've done people's photo shoots and so on. They've seen it. Like I've done family friends, but they're just like, okay, I think Curtis sometimes presses a button. I think that's what they see.
They don't really get that it's a bigger part of your life than the day job.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's a little different than any of the other stories we've gotten. So that's, you
Yeah,
know,
I
another
mean that's
facet on the diamond of life, you know. Wow. How is that? I mean, I know that's all you've ever known, you know, they're your
sure.
parents and it's all you've ever known. But when you see or hear stories about other people whose families take all this interest in what they're doing, how do you experience that? How is that for you?
Sure. So I would say, so me and my therapist talk about this all the time. Because my current partner, they are my partner calls their mom like every single day. And for me, I probably talk to my mom maybe once every 2 weeks. And that's very normal for us. I would say that if I started calling her more, my mom would probably like, are you okay? It's like you're calling me too much at this point. And so I will say, so I did in the dating that I did growing up, I would go to Thanksgivings and Christmas. Like my family doesn't really celebrate many holidays. And so I think the only holiday we really celebrate is specifically Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year. And that's the only thing we celebrate. Like we don't even celebrate each other's birthdays. And so as like I know my story is very different and my experience is very different, but it's I kind of just see it and just say that like this is just how what I've seen and what I know. And but I've experienced Thanksgivings and Christmases with other different families. I've seen the different dynamics, different traditions. It's all very interesting to me. Uh, but I think it'll be interesting that if I ever have a family to kind of do research, like, okay, we can like I guess we can do Thanksgiving and Christmas, so and all this stuff. It's so I really do emphasize to people that these day-to-day interactions that I have with you guys, they mean a lot more to me than the average person. And it's everything. Community is literally everything. And so just because for me, there's not a lot of celebration that really exists, period. And whenever I think the way how I've kind of seen it and what I've told my therapist, like, I think it's kind of like a sense of like there are parties happening all over. I'm just not invited. But whenever I have been part of these parties or whatever, and I saw the Christmas tree or whatever, it's just kind of like, oh, it's cool, but it's definitely just not how I grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, on some level, there's a certain level of freedom in what you're describing, you know, because so many people are beholden to go to all of those family gatherings, whether they want to or not. And sometimes family are not the people we really want to hang out with. You know, we have a chosen family for that very, very reason. So it's all in the way you look at it because some people could certainly see that you have a level of freedom in the way that you were raised and not so much emphasis put on close-knit family, all in the way you look at it.
Yeah, no, I
So,
love it.
I'm gonna pull the big question out now. Are you ready for the big question?
Okay. What you got for me?
In your current creative life, what is like here now, real time, what is the biggest pain point? In other words, that challenge that if it were solved would be a game changer for your creative journey or creative life.
It probably would be, it probably would legitimately just be time and money. I think so. And just because for me, when it comes to whenever I do my photo shoots or anything with individuals, it's really just I will sit down and show them all the pictures. I'll sit through with them and I'll go through all the conversations. So, I mean, it's the way how I carry my business. It's a very, very lengthy process, and I'm totally fine with that. But ultimately, it takes me away from my day job. And so whenever I say the sentiments of money, like I think so many creatives, very similar to mine, would say that like ideally we would love to drop everything and pursue being a portrait artist or, like travel and do X, Y, and Z. But I think it's more just logistics for me. It really just boils down to that. But, whenever I make the sentiments that, like, hey, like, I want to do cinematography, I'll be honest with you guys. Like, of course, the passion and creative field that I picked is a very tech an expensive one. So it's like if I want to get into cinematography, I want to buy these cinema cameras, I have to be ready to drop like thousands and thousands of dollars. And like although like maybe I do have that money or the discretionary income, but like as I've kind of told you guys, my consulting job, it's just like I think about all like how does that affect my cash flow and so on. It's like I'm at this very for my creative journey, I'm very like very free and it's like out and so on, but and then the other side is like I'm a very type A individual. So it's like I kind of maybe I overcomplicate things. Maybe my thing is my pain point is I overcomplicate things too much.
Well, that could be said of all of us. So,
Yes.
do you see a time in your life where you might leave the consulting and go full time with creativity? Is that a dream or a desire?
In all honesty, specifically where I'm at, I actually think that it's specifically my calling. So the where I'm at, I honestly hyperfixate on it. It's a very creative journey that I'm at, like looking at these different businesses and thinking about what are these different solutions, and it's a very creative process in itself. So I feel as if I'm using my creative brain there. Uh, but specifically dropping everything to pursue, I think I honestly like to keep my a pure creative area. Like I like to keep it at arm's distance because I essentially crave it. I think about it, and it makes me, in my opinion, a little bit more creative overall. Just because I'm not demanding myself to be creative at 24/7. And so I've given
That's
you
gold.
sentiments. Yeah.
That's gold right there.
Yeah.
I
You
like
know,
where I'm at. I like my relationship to everything so far. I honestly wouldn't change much with my day to day right now.
you're the second person that has said, I made it a point. I believe that I could have two passions.
Exactly.
He's an actor and he is a tech person with Microsoft, I believe.
Okay,
Mhm.
there you go.
And he loves both and he didn't have any intention of giving either one up because they feed different parts of his soul. And I thought, how brilliant is that?
Hmm.
Yeah.
To have intentionally chosen two passions rather than thinking you can, we're as human beings, we're just so either or people. And it really can be an and.
Hmm.
And you found
Hmm.
the and that's just brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant. Curtis,
Yeah.
this has been amazing.
Well, and for our listeners, you're referring to Tony Hale in episode number 25.
Can y'all believe how he's got these
Uh,
episodes
love it, Dwight. Thank you. Now I gotta
memorized
listen.
with the different featured guests. He's got a brain like a steel trap. Well, Curtis, thank you so much for giving us your time today and sharing your story. I've thoroughly enjoyed everything you've had to say. You've made me smile a few times.
Oh, what a privilege. No, I've been smiling the entire time. I've this has been rent free in my head in the last like couple days, and so I'm just so glad to have experienced this. I thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.